Hi, so in this video I'm going to explain to you how we learn things in general and how that has to do with how our nervous system works and what the role of guilt is in learning, because guilt actually doesn't help us learn. It actually does the whole contrary. It makes it way more difficult for us to learn. So our autonomic nervous system has two branches, and it's the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. These two branches work together, but in a particular way. When the sympathetic nervous system gets activated, the parasympathetic nervous system gets deactivated, and vice versa. So the sympathetic nervous system has to do with responses like fight or flight, and getting the body moving and running, etc. And the parasympathetic nervous system has to do with the contrary, with behaviors that have to do with sleep, eat, sex, and so forth. So when this sympathetic gets activated, the parasympathetic gets deactivated. So when we enter fight or flight mode, then we can't sleep very well, we can't digest very well, and we can't enjoy connection with others. So the thing is, I'm going to explain how we learn things with the sympathetic nervous system, how this conditions the way we learn things, and how we learn unconsciously to react. And then I'm going to explain to you how we can actually learn to do something consciously and not have this sympathetic nervous system so activated, and that way we can be more in control of our reactions, of our thoughts, and of our lives, and in the long run to be able to better our self-esteem. So imagine there's this primitive guy, primitive man, I'll call him Fred. He's walking along the savannah on a nice sunny day, and then suddenly he encounters a fresh footprint which belongs to a deadly creature, say a dinosaur who is going to probably eat him. First, when Fred sees the footprint and sees that it's oozing, his autonomic nervous system starts activating. Actually, what happens is the sympathetic nervous system starts activating. And at the beginning, everything's cool, but he's starting to, this activation, it's like, okay, wait a minute, something here is going on. I don't know what it is. So it's like an observation response. But then, when he realizes that he's in danger, we go through this threshold, which we go through, and then when we go through here, the brain, there's the frontal cortex of the brain, which is the part which we think with, and here is the cerebellum, which is like the hard disk that holds all the programs. So, and this is the stem and the limbic system and the amygdala. So at this point, these two get activated, and the brain says, okay, what do I know how to do? What are the things that I have learned that I can use to confront the situation? So he says, well, I can scream, I can yell, I can jump, I can hit, but none of that is good enough to confront the situation with the dinosaur, because this dinosaur is going to eat him. So there comes another point, this is another threshold, that once we reach here, what happens is the amygdala, which is the central part of the brain that is in charge of our survival, says, hey dude, to the cortex, you didn't know what to do in this situation, so guess what, now I'm taking over. So the amygdala sends a signal for the cortex to shut off. And now the amygdala rules. And the amygdala, basically what it does is say, okay, let's run. So Fred automatically, without even thinking about it, without even realizing it, he finds himself running, and running like hell. I mean, he's really good at running when your cortex is disconnected, nothing hinders your reactions. So you run very effectively, very efficiently. But what happens that when he's running under survival mode, do you think he will be able to see the beautiful flowers in the fields? No, nor the sunshine in the beautiful sunset. He won't be able to see any of this. When you're here, you can't see any of this. When you're here, all you're going to see is the log that's in the way that you have to overcome. You're going to see all the dangers that are going to that can be more of a threat to you. You're going to see all the obstacles and like the holes or the ravines that you have to jump over, but you're not going to see the beautiful things. So when we are in this mode, we are in survival mode, we are in an individualized mode. It's only about us. It's all the only thing that is important is our individual survival, and all we see are the bad things. So then Fred is running, and he's running towards his cave, and finally he runs up, he climbs up to his cave, and he hides in it, and finally he's safe from the creature. So all this activation just plunges down, goes very quickly, and he's inside his cave. He's all scared, but he's panting, he's almost breathless, but he has this feeling of like, oh my God, that was a close call. Whew, but I made it. And so what he feels when this activation falls so quickly is relief. So what happens is, every time we have a strong activation of our autonomic nervous system, of our sympathetic nervous system, because we did not have the right response for a particular situation, then what happens is that if we do have a behavior that brings us relief, we condition that way of reacting for the next time. But the problem is that this relief, this way of reacting, is totally out of our control. We have no control, no conscious control, because the frontal cortex isn't working here. This circuit of relief, of activation and relief, of making a certain response and having a relief, is governed by the amygdala. So as I said, there's no conscious control. It is totally involuntary. And the thing is that it is very efficient because it is part of our survival mode. But what will happen is that the next time Fred goes out into the savannah, anything similar to this footprint or to the creature that scared him will activate the same response. And as I said, he will have no control over that response because his amygdala judges that, hey, you do not know what to do. So as soon as I see anything that reminds me of this, I take over. And the thing is, many of the things we do in life are governed by this relief response. For example, when we yell, when we lie, when we drink, when we take drugs, when we hit somebody, when you have a quarrel. There's all these situations in life that we are carrying out in a non-voluntary way. We are carrying out with this response. And also very important to understand that our brain doesn't know the difference between doing or thinking. So there's also a lot of thoughts that we have that produce us, that cause us to have relief, but are a response to an activation that was too exaggerated and that the amygdala had overridden the control of the frontal cortex, and so we have no control. For example, our obsessions. So when we think out of control, when our mind spins around like crazy and it's going its own way, what it actually is doing is it is running away from its particular monster, its particular stimulus, its dinosaur. It's running away from its dinosaur and going into the cave. But it's like we have a stimulus and we don't know a situation, or a confrontation. We don't know how to deal with it. Like you have an exam, or you're not sure of how if you're going to know everything. So then you go to the kitchen and you have a piece of cake, and that's like going into your cave. Or then you start daydreaming about what you're going to do next weekend. That's another cave. And sometimes what we do, well, normally what we do is go from one cave to another cave, to another cave, to another cave. And the cave of the cave of the cave of the cave is what obsessions are about. And I don't know if you know anything about Greek mythology or ancient mythologies. And I mean, many traditions have this same myth. But basically the heroes would travel into the underworld to confront their greatest fears. And that underworld would be located or situated in the deepest part of the cave. In other words, they would find the underworld in the cave of the cave of the cave. So as you see, the cave of the cave of the cave of the cave are our obsessions. And our obsessions are our own personal hell. So, going back to Fred, he's here in the cave. He's bewildered. He's useless because now via the phenomena of generalization, he's scared of leaving the cave. Everything makes him get scared and react this way. So he realizes he's stuck and that he's got to do something about it. So he starts planning. Now this is the way to get out of this vicious cycle. If you start planning, if you start thinking of something new, of something a new confrontation of the situation, and then of course he has to carry it out. So he thinks, okay, well, I can get my buddies, we can find some last model clubs, the latest clubs that are the strongest, the coolest clubs there are, and we can go and face the creature, and we can try to scare it so it falls off a cliff, and then once it's under the cliff, then we can beat it to death, and I'm going to win. I'm going to beat my rival, no? So he goes out, he goes with his friend, he goes with his new strategies, he goes with something new. So the amygdala says, okay, let's pause. I'll give you a chance, because now you know something new, and it might work. So his activation again, he finds the creature, he's with his buddies, he's with these new clubs, and he confronts the situation. He's scared, but he's within this threshold. So his amygdala does not kick in. He can actually confront the situation, and he can do it successfully. So he starts beating the creature up. Well, they scare him, it falls down, falls off the cliff, beats the creature up, and he kills the creature. So now he's beaten his monster. Now he's overcome his fears. And now he feels exhilarated. Now he has a great sense of satisfaction. So what happens that when we have this feeling, it is because we have designed a plan or learned something new. We have carried it out, and we have proven it successful. So in this way, we integrate a new knowledge into our brain and into our bodies. And when we do that, we are learning something that is conscious. We are actually doing something that is within our voluntary control. And this is the best way, when we do things that follow this circuit, when we learn new things, carry it out, and prove and find out that it works, we are actually improving our self-esteem. But when we do things in this circuit, our self-esteem is actually going down. It's getting worse and worse. The more we do things out of control, the more we do things by reaction instead of being proactive, the worse our self-esteem will be. And the thing is, there's a factor that adds to all this, and that factor is guilt. Mainly thanks to the misinterpretation of the greater religions, especially in our Western society, we're meant to feel guilty every time we did something that was wrong. But why did we do things that were wrong? Most of the time, it was because we had in some way learned it as a reaction, and it just comes out. So we tell lies, we yell at people, we have arguments, we do all these things, or we go into addictions, and we do all these things that are wrong, but we do it out without any control. We do it as a instinctive reaction of fear to a situation which we did not know how to confront because we never learned to do it. So what happens when you feel guilty about doing something which you had no way of controlling how to do is that we cannot see, because of this guilt, what is the stimuli, what exactly is the situation, what exactly is the emotion you were having, or what is it that triggered you into this response. So as I was saying, if we feel guilty, we cannot observe what is it that made us respond this way. And if we cannot observe what made us respond this way, we cannot act on this point, on the initial point. We can only see ourselves when we're here, running away. So it is very important for your self-esteem to be able to improve it, for you to learn something new that gives you satisfaction, for you to overcome those behaviors that you don't like and that are not good for you, to not feel guilty about it. We must not feel guilty of the things we have done when our frontal cortex wasn't connected. We cannot feel guilty of things we have done under survival mode. And we cannot feel guilty of doing things because we had no other way of doing that thing, of reacting in front of that situation, because we never learned how to confront that situation. So the important thing is to understand we have to be responsible. We have to of observing what it is that triggers us. We have to be responsible of starting our conscious observation of ourselves instead of guilty. And that way we can learn new strategies. We can be open to new strategies, because if we're here, we're not open to anybody. We are in fight. We're in flight mode, and we are totally overrun by our amygdala, and we are totally disconnected from every other single person. So not only are we doing something that we don't want to do, but we all, on top of that, we feel alone and disconnected when we are like this. And that's it with this brief explanation. I hope you understand a bit better the role of guilt in learning. In learning, as I said, behaviors, physical behaviors, but also thoughts and mental behaviors follow this exact same pattern because the brain doesn't distinguish them. And in my next video, I will explain guilt from another perspective, and how we have to also assume guilt to be able to open up our consciousness.